Drunk tanks could become a regular sight in UK cities if they're successful at keeping intoxicated partygoers out of A&E on New Year's Eve. The head of the NHS, Simon Stevens, says he's monitoring the performance of the mobile units, which are meant to be a safe place for people to sober up and to stop them going to hospital. Well, an estimated 12 to 15% of attendances at emergency departments in the UK are due to acute alcohol intoxication. NHS England says as many as 70% of people who attend A&E on a Friday or a Saturday night are due to alcohol. Well, Kishan Rees is an emergency doctor and joins me from our central London studio. Kishan, how do these really work? Have you had experience of them? Have you seen the impact that they've had on an A&E department?
Hi, Jane. No, so I haven't had experience of them in terms of how they work themselves. But I think one thing that we've got to be really important, take really seriously, because it's very important, is people are turning to alcohol because they have other long-term issues, and it's a short-term coping mechanism or strategy. So I think it's reassuring that we're looking at alternatives and looking at different measures to take pressure off A&E departments, because of course we need that. But what we must be very careful of is not blaming patients, because it's a slippery slope. And every negative headline between doctors and patients in the NHS, what that does is it chips away at that doctor-patient relationship, and it just ripens up for getting rid of the health service, basically. So we've got to be really careful with that. But it is a positive thing if it is evidence-based and it is in the best interest of the patient, both short and long term.
We spoke to a GP a little earlier on Sky News, and she said that she was concerned that a fully trained health professional isn't looking at these people in the first instance, and said that she doesn't really think that they are always the best idea. Would you echo that, or do you think actually keeping people out of A&E is more useful, so you can really concentrate on the people who are seriously ill?
No, I think we've got to be really careful, and that's why it's reassuring to hear that the effectiveness of these schemes are being monitored in terms of whether they are safe for our patients. Certainly international experience on drunk tanks is in the acute setting, maybe the monitoring isn't quite enough as we need. And certainly in terms of the long term, in terms of detox and rehabilitation, those services, what we can't have is a culture where we just chuck people into a drunk tank, sober them up, and then let them go back into society and have the same problems and things. So I've done a job in drug and alcohol detox psychiatry, and I've seen the positive impact detox services can make on patients and their lives. But only in November there was £43 million worth of cuts. So 2/3 of councils across the country had to scale back their drug and alcohol detox things. So yes, patients need to take a responsibility, but we can't blame them, and services need to be appropriately funded so that we can offer care to what is often the most vulnerable in society.
Do you think there is a danger that these may be seen as being a safety net for some people? They've been tried in Bristol, Cardiff and Newcastle. Is there any evidence that people in those places think, oh well, I can have an extra one because I can just go and sleep it off in the drunk tank?
I think we've got to be very careful of that, absolutely, and we need to be. A lot of this is cultural change. I mean, Britain does have a problem with binge drinking, and there's arguments out there that it's related to austerity and people are struggling and they're turning to, there's a term, diseases of despair, so depression, drug addiction, alcohol addiction. So we need to be careful about that, and I think a lot of it is long-term cultural change and education in terms of making it, making kids know that alcohol needs to be treated carefully and respected and not abused. But blaming patients is a slippery slope, and I as a doctor I don't feel comfortable with that. And that's a really good point, Jane. I think you've got to be mindful of the fact that if people think, oh well, I can just go and sober up in a drunk tank, it doesn't matter if I get hammered, that is completely against the culture that we should be promoting, really.
In terms of those that you see at A&E who come to you with alcohol-related issues, usually at weekends, how many of them do you think then do follow it up, do then go to their GP and say, look, I think I've got a problem?
So I have people wanting to get help, but they can't because the funding isn't there for detox. And this is, to be honest, I see more long-term alcoholics that have problems and relapse and then try and detox and then they have seizures and then they have problems, rather than seeing revellers. That's maybe just in the localities that I work. But yeah, I have lots of patients that want help, but because of those cuts that I've mentioned, that where councils are having to get rid of their drug and alcohol detox services, they don't have that support, and they need that support, because it has to be a longer term solution rather than just locking them up or letting them sober up and then kicking them out and make the same mistake again.
And presumably the financial impact on the NHS, if these patients are unable to stop drinking, is greater than the cost would be of getting them rehabilitated.
Yeah, rehabilitation in the longer term, of course, is going to save money. But I think if we were wanting to privatise a health service, and we've seen Virgin getting contracts or not getting contracts and then suing the NHS, which to me is just absolutely madness, and I wouldn't want that kind of situation to happen. But if we're going to see that situation where private companies are getting involved in healthcare, for that to happen, what needs to occur is public confidence in the service to be undermined. And patients getting blamed, GPs getting blamed, A&E getting blamed, Brexit, immigration, all these different things. There's a common pattern occurring here where there's some fundamental root cause, there's problems that need addressing. And unfortunately, the NHS has been kicked back and forth between the political parties like a football. And we need long-term solutions to this. And we need the electorate to wake up and hold politicians accountable on both sides. If the NHS is something worth fighting for and preserving, because I think it's great, and I think we've got to.
OK, Dr. Kishan Rees, straying slightly from the point there about drug tanks, but good to talk to you anyway. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much. Cheers.